Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm part 97. Not sure what I'm going to call this one. We can continue on our search and on our derivation and our logical discussion for our search of the definition of the word sensorality with an S. We've talked about a bunch of the differentiation. We're continuing on with the same tone and the same type of topics and progression in this one. Had some good derivations, insights, and realizations yesterday that we'll be discussing today. Mostly logical stuff, bits and pieces of physics and mathematics, but again, all of it's kind of combined for me. We're using linguistics to establish a definition and show how it extends our physical intuition and our physical knowledge of the world around us. I've already solidified and proven that this proofing method is legitimate. This is my third time deriving an axiom, first one publicly in the form of videos like this, and I've done it one time publicly over email. And I have a formal paper. You can go look that up if you want. Or you can just watch these videos as it is. Once we get to the final definition, it'll be self-explanatory. Then you can go back and look at the other videos if you'd like. Again, just to find some insight. But picking up exactly where we left off in terms of the types of things we're discussing, trying to find our final definition to axiomatize sensorality. And we are very close. We will finish this episode with the final form of the resolution. It's not the reduced form, but it is the final form, and it's a pretty cool result. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is abbreviation. Often changes syllability. Syllability meaning dimensionality. Dimensionality, how many dimensions are there? There are 3. Just a natural number with no unit, just 3. And so syllability is dimensionality applied to linguistics. How many syllables does a word have? How many syllables are into sentence? What type of frequency and iteration considerations can we make with a set number of elements in our phonetic basis? How about vowels? A, E, I, O, U, sometimes Y. Consonants, the different letters. What type of numeric statements can we say about syllables? That is what syllability is, and the word syllability ending in a Y just represents anything that can apply to what syllables are and how they function. But when you abbreviate something, I try to think of some examples. For whatever reason, I couldn't think of a bunch of good ones off the top of my head, but a good one that I did think of was specification. Right? If someone says get the specs, there's abbreviating specification. But if you say spec, right, you have that k, you have a hard sound at the end of the SPEC of spec instead of spec or of specification, right? So also a form of speciality, but not super relevant. But specification, right? Specification, it's a soft C as opposed to specs. So syllability abbreviations will modify the syllability. Again, just another facet of language, just again putting another piece into the puzzle. Nothing super intuitive there, but it's empirically obvious. But here is it was syllability and branding. So what can we say about syllability and branding? Let's just start with some examples. We have Logan Paul and impulsive, right? We see impulsive, right? The impulse, the ontological word, and then impulsive, the brand. And so we see a brand, we use syllability to substitute impulsive AU for, to reference his name, as opposed to the fundamental ontological word impulse, referencing physics. Or like a beat, a pulse, an impulse. And so you just see the syllability changing the meaning in reference to a brand. So again, you'll see syllability. If you don't know what syllability is, go look at somebody trying to create a brand, or you go try to create a brand, and you will intuitively try to create these minimalistic expressions to describe what your company or what your product or what your service provides. And so that's an example. We have Spanx. I think the founder's name is Sarah Lively, just people I've seen on Shark Tank. But it's a clothing brand, but Spanx, right? If you spank somebody, everyone knows what that is. You hit them on the behind. It's like I was with Joe Girl last night. No, I'm just kidding. I don't get girls. Or dudes for that matter. but the point being Spanx, right? It's referencing an action where people know what spanking is, and Spanx, kind of like if you have spandex and you Spanx, it's some sort of combination. That's kind of the intuition that they're putting together. And then here's the word that's our little bow on our present. You have Kleenex, right? That's kind of, you see branding become a household name. Right, so someone will say, pass me a Kleenex, and they won't say, pass you a tissue, when Kleenex is obviously just a brand of tissue, but Kleenex is, obviously built on the syllability of clean, but it's become a household name. And right, you have YouTube, like where this video is posted, probably came from boob tube, like the slang for the TV, the television. So you're on the boob tube, now let's go on the YouTube. Just being, reference to the individuality or infinite uniqueness. And it's obviously a media platform. I'm sure if you're seeing this video, you know what YouTube is. Gymshark, another clothing brand. But right, what onomatopoeia are we attacking? Or that's not really onomatopoeia, but what analogy are we referencing? Oh, shark attack, we're aggressive, we're disciplined, we're getting in the gym, we're a lifestyle brand. So again, just all quick examples. All branding is, this combination of syllability and experience and whatever your product provides for the marketplace, using your name to reference your company. And so I have another conjecture that was really deep and intuitive, but I think market share precedes brand recognition, meaning you have to gain market share before you can be a household name or even a recognized name. When you drive down the street and you see, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and you just see, we have a company called Buckeye Heating, and it's just, you can never use the company, know nothing about it, but it's just a company, the brand isn't really like built out, it doesn't look like it, so it's just like, Johnny has a truck and he decides to start a company, and then he gets market share, he gets one referral, and then gets another referral, and then gets another referral, and once he gets to a certain point, it makes sense to unify into a brand, and to collectively consolidate his market share into an identity that he is. And so, it seems simple at face value, but I really think intuitively we can prove, and I'm conjecturing, that all brand recognition, you have to have market share before that. And in a fundamental, rigorous, complete mathematical proof, intuitive way. Stabilization of universal properties and axiomatic logic are like saved progress on a video game. We've used this analogy before, but it's really, really true. Right, we're on level 3. We have dimensionality 3. So light stabilizes into mass, but it's where it breaks away from the level. It's like we're at the last level, right? Not in terms of like, there's not going to be a dimensionality 4. It's the dimensionality R1, or the state of the universe at when there was nothing, when there was one-dimensional component, when there was two-dimensional components. Those 3 states, those all occurred within, the first petaseconds of the universe. And so R3 has been the vast majority of all time that's passed, and it's not going to stabilize anything else. 3 is complete. And so I don't want you to view it as like in the video game analogy, it's like you keep leveling up. You get to a certain level, and that's dimensionality 3, which we're at, and we're going to stay at that level. That's when you get your conservation laws, right? Nothing can be created or destroyed. It can just change its form. And so that's going on there. I just want you to have the idea that like the stabilization of R4 is going to happen, because again, it says that in my paper, but again, it's really unifying the linguistics that was presented by the academia, theoretical physicists, but there is no dimensionality 4. We'll never get back to dimensionality 2, and so every bit of information that's ever come or ever will come will be dimensionality 3. But again, level 1 is the string, interacting through frequency, it's inaccessible. Level 2, again using the analogy, was the light stabilization into mass, or energy stabilizing into mass. We use the term light, but that's evidenced by, in the paper I say infinitesimally interacting and then directly interacting. If you're completely stabilized, you can't interact with anything, and that's the set of nothing. If you have one-dimensional component strings by a frequency, you can interact through R3 with the scintillation, which Einstein articulated as the photoelectric effect, and then you have energy and momentum, and then you stabilize into energy, momentum, and mass in R3. And those are the 3-dimensional components that we have built and proven our physical model on. And so the cosmological microwave background radiation is the infinitesimal interaction from R2 to R3. And again, the vibration being the infinitesimal interacting physical component and light equals mc squared being the direct interaction between R3 and R2. And so the past is always finite, and the future is always infinite. And so now I really want to play around and change the syllability, the prefix and suffix of infinite. And just think about those words out loud. So we have infinite, which means it doesn't end, it does not terminate. So it is indefinite. We have finite, and then we can say finity, right? Infinity, clearly, you know, the prefix in being not finite, not finity. So we can define finity, and we can say definite is definity. Infinite, indefinite, indefinity, and infinity, and then undefined. And so then why are we saying these different things? Because again, we're iterating these, and it's just one of the quickest iterations that I've ever gone through. But indefinitely is undefined. So when are we going to stop creating new theorems? Provably never. So I can literally prove it, provably, not me saying this. The scientific results are independent of me or any scientific result is independent of the scientist who produced it. And so just because I happen to prove that there's infinite theorems and I have the capacity to derive them, I can literally just sit this and do this indefinitely, and I know that. But there is no end to this. There is no end to the changing forms of black bodies. Black bodies radiate. There are no closed systems. So that is the logical extension of that physical reality. Definity is defined. And so again, what we're doing for sensorality is we're showing the finiteness of a definition, a unique string of words, which is sound, which is vibration, that defines a physical phenomenon. And so we're deriving that pairing. Definitions are finite, and definitions terminate. Termination ends. And that is the logical conclusion. That is the logical. I have a little square with the lines through in QED. Right? Termination ends. That's logically consistent. Termination ends. That's it. That's it. But that's not the reduced form. That's not the really poignant result I'm talking about. But now we get into where, while I discussed the dynamic limit in my paper, I will introduce it now to make it make sense, and then we'll continue on. Again, I have another big section that's really cool, and it is a cool result. So 3 cool results today.